I have an urgent message for you today related to Russia, Ukraine, and our ability to ascend as a humanity. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean, and I work together with an interuniversal, interdimensional, and extraterrestrial force known as Telstar, along with Archangel Michael. The war between Russia and Ukraine is extremely complex. Today, I'm going to address some aspects of that situation which are the most urgent when it comes to our ability to ascend and stay on a higher timeline. Now, I had an extremely vivid dream the other day that I believe contained a message for our humanity. It was one of those kinds of dreams that didn't really feel like a dream. It felt completely real. So I want to briefly share that dream with you, and then I will explain how it relates to our current situation of war on this planet. Now, in this dream, I found myself in a place where there were humans who were very similar to ourselves in terms of their appearance and their environment. But what was different is that these people and their environment had a level of vibrancy and health that doesn't exist here. There was a sense of freedom and abundance everywhere. The people were very intelligent in a strikingly natural way, but they were not at all egotistical. What struck me the most was how they were with each other. They were so relaxed together. They were very close to each other, yet they were still independent as unique individuals. They were respectful of one another. They did not seem judgmental. Overall, they just seemed very happy. What was most amazing was the way that they talked to each other and how close they seemed. They just naturally helped and respected one another. They were calm and they seemed to have a love for each other and for life. Now, I did not sense that they were perfect. You could tell that they had problems, but they were not crushed by these problems. Their problems were not the dominant force in their lives. The dominant feeling was that they had tremendous potential. It felt so good being there that I did not want to leave. I suspect that I was either on some other planet or in some other dimension, but yet one that was kind of similar to ours. Fortunately, I woke up right after this experience, which allowed it to remain extremely vivid and imprint my consciousness. So here's what happened next and what I think the message was. As I woke up, my energy naturally tuned into our humanity on this planet. This was really shocking because the contrast between the people in this dream and our actual humanity on this earth was quite dramatic. Compared to the people in my dream, we collectively seem quite primitive on this planet. We seem like cynical, fearful barbarians who fight and maintain suspicion and separation from each other. By comparison, we seem dark and sullen and kind of de-energized. Now, maybe the people in my dream are what we would be like on a higher timeline. I think that's a strong possibility. It was almost like a message of, hey, this is where you guys are supposed to be. But seeing the contrast was so important, and here's why. I think that many times people make the mistake of thinking that because we have all of this technology that we are an evolved civilization. But that's actually just the perspective of the ego. I think we try to get a read on where we are as a civilization by comparing ourselves to ourselves, which gives us no perspective at all. That's why I found this dream to be so valuable. It gave me an actual perspective on where we are compared to where we need to be. Now, the obvious question is, why are we so different from the humans in this dream who were obviously living in a higher state of consciousness? Yet it's not like they were some huge distance from where we need to be ourselves. The main difference that I could see is that we are controlled and they are not. Again, what stood out to me the most was the beautiful quality of how they could talk to each other. They weren't talking through fake personalities designed to impress or manipulate someone out of fear. They were just naturally free and accepting of one another. They were free to be themselves. Now, here on Earth, we have to be very careful when we talk to another person. Mostly, we just say the things we are told to say and think in the ways we are told to think. We filter everything through what we believe will be acceptable to the mind-controlled collective that we live in. Which brings me to the war between Russia and Ukraine. How many people thought about Ukraine before this war broke out? And how many people were obsessed with hating Russia? Did you get up every day wondering how the people in Ukraine were doing? Did you even care? Did you have regular conversations with friends and family about how terrible Russia is? I kind of doubt it. I'm pretty sure that unless you live in that part of the world, you did not think of these things at all. Now, of course, people are going to say, but wait a minute, Saratoga, what about the war? What about the invasion? That's why we're so concerned. And that makes sense, of course. But here's the problem. As soon as this war started, you only had to look at your watch and count the seconds before the war propaganda would start flowing like water from a broken dam. How easy do you think it would be today to have a free and open conversation about this war? You know, one where you could exchange ideas and share different opinions without being crucified for saying the wrong thing. But see, we're not supposed to think on this planet anymore. Thinking for ourselves is dangerous for the controllers because if we do, they lose control entirely. They have been so successful with their mass mind control machine for the past 2 years that they are not about to give it up now. Did you really think these reptiles were going to stage a war and let us decide for ourselves what is really going on? Of course not. The war is basically being presented to us as though it is one giant video game or sports event. Zelensky is the hero and Putin is the bad guy. Ukraine is good and Russia is evil. And you better take the prescribed side or else the mind-controlled mob will come after you. So let's look more deeply into this propaganda and see what is really going on. Firstly, the oversimplification of something this complex is designed to make us stupid. But more importantly, I suspect that we are being emotionally manipulated to get behind the next world war and support it. This war is just over a week old, and look how much has already been programmed into our collective consciousness. And hear me out, because there's something really, really significant that's going on behind the scenes of this entire portrayal that I doubt hardly anyone has been thinking about. Ukraine is being portrayed as the bastion of freedom, peace, and sovereignty. It's being portrayed in every positive way imaginable. But most importantly, it's being portrayed as the ideological symbol of who we all are and what we want in life. I mean, you know, we all just want to be left alone to live our lives in freedom, just like the Ukrainians do. And then the big bad Russians come in and destroy it all for no reason whatsoever, we are told. They are just evil, horrible people. And Putin is definitely the Antichrist. I mean, he just deserves to die. So right away, we are being presented with two extremes as though this is a fundamental battle between good and evil. Do you see how this emotionally shifts us away from the real battle on this planet? The battle between humanity and the controllers? Do you see how they have very cleverly shifted our spiritual, emotional energy onto a false battlefield of the controller's own making? And then, of course, like all good mental programming, we must have slogans. Slogans like, "We are Ukraine," or "We're all Ukrainians now." See, they need for us to be identified with the Ukrainians in order to ultimately get us to demand a big war against Russia. And here's another little hidden thing that we probably ought to pay attention to. We are now socially required to sport the Ukrainian flag as a symbol of our worth as human beings. Kind of like the masks were. That's right, the masks were also a symbol of your worth as a human being. All of this is designed to get us fully identified with the side that the controllers want us on. They want us on the side of Ukraine. Isn't that obvious? It's obvious because we were not given the slightest chance to think for ourselves before siding with Ukraine and Zelensky became socially mandatory. I mean, it's really gotten to the point where you just can't be neutral. Hey, if you're neutral, you are immediately suspect. You really are for Russia, aren't you? See, neutrality is not allowed because, God forbid, if you are neutral, it might mean that you actually want to think about things for yourself. That's why no one is allowed to be in the middle. You better be all in for Ukraine now, no questions asked. Otherwise, you are just a terrible person who just wants people to die. Wait a minute, where have I heard that before? Oh, that's right. You better be all in on the masks and mandates. Otherwise, you are a terrible person who just wants people to die. You'd think these controllers would at least try to have a little bit of variety. And here's another little hidden piece of mind control. The EU has said that Putin is not behaving according to, quote, the expectations of the global community, and therefore he is unhinged, mentally unstable, and basically crazy. And thus, he should be isolated. Now, that could sound reasonable at first glance, but I have no doubt that eventually those very same words will also be applied to each one of us. We will be told at some point that if we do not behave according to the expectations of the global community, then we are mentally unstable, dangerous, and need to be rounded up and isolated. And they have already instilled the image of Putin as a monster to subconsciously get us to back up that rationale. Do you see the subtle mind control parallels here? If they can get us to hate the image of Putin that they have portrayed, then later on they can also get us to hate anyone else who doesn't comply with the so-called global community's expectations. And who decides those expectations anyway? Well, the controllers do, of course. Now let's condense all of this into what the controllers might really be trying to accomplish with this war at this time. I think they might want a world war with Russia and maybe later even with China. They know that people in general will not back up such a massive war, so they have to condition us to accept it. They need our collective agreement that it's a good idea. I think they are trying to psychologically maneuver us into thinking that Ukraine stands for everything we believe in, so they can then say that Russia threatens the very freedom that we are all fighting for. They may even want to get us to a place where we are so emotionally fraught over this situation that we literally demand that the powers of the world take Russia out. And then, of course, all hell will break loose. And that's exactly what they want. They want us to get behind them destroying Russia, which will only further debilitate this planet and everyone on it with a massive war, the likes of which no one has ever seen before. See, sometimes I think these guys are trying to make us as crazy as they are. Now, I always think that war is kind of like that saying they have about gambling casinos. They always say, when it comes to casinos, the house always wins. Well, when it comes to war, The unseen corporate powers behind the war always win, and everyone else loses, and humanity as a whole is devastated once again. So we need to be very careful about taking sides in this current situation. We need to stay mindful and fully conscious. Are we just unwittingly playing into the controller's hands once again? It's probably very likely that they are behind the scenes, pulling the strings, and controlling both sides of this conflict. Just like they did with the virus issue, they controlled both sides with fear. And if that's the case, then we're not being very smart. See, this has always been their MO. Set up a conflict between two sides and then manipulate the masses to take the side that the controllers want them to take so they can then demonize the other side. Do you remember how with that health issue we were only allowed to hear one side of the story? Have you noticed the same thing happening again with this war? The exact same level of censorship is happening here. There is only one acceptable position and only one acceptable thing to say. And the media shows us countless images of death, destruction, and bloodshed to get us to back that position up. Just like they showed us countless images of sickness and death to get us to back up the position they wanted us to take in the other situation. Honestly, this whole thing is so reptilian, it is ridiculous. They never tried to inspire us with love. The only thing they know is negative manipulation using fear, death, and suffering. So we really need to get a clue and stop falling for this stuff. And here's a final, deeper concern that I want to share with you. The more we continue to fall for this kind of propaganda and manipulation, the more we become mentally habituated to do this. I think that we are collectively losing the ability to think for ourselves. And if we lose that ability, we will also lose our ability to evolve. And if we lose our ability to evolve, we also lose our ability to ascend. Instead, we will end up living like controlled animals. And that's exactly what the controllers have in mind. They want to turn us into mentally controlled cyborgs. And that is only possible when we behave like dutiful, obedient, mind-controlled sheep. So we really need to look out for ourselves, even if everyone else around us is choosing the alternate path of having their thoughts and outlook controlled by these invisible authorities. Remember what I said about the humans in my dream who were clearly not controlled? They were in possession of their own minds and hearts. And what a beautiful situation that was. We need to take our minds back on this earth. That is the first and very important step in taking back our sovereignty as individuals. And it is urgent that we begin that process now, because it's only going to get worse if we neglect ourselves in this way. You can start by trying to find people that you can talk to and reason with in a way that you can respectfully share ideas. See if you can find at least one person who is willing to let you be yourself and say what you want to say without taking it personally and judging you. And then you, of course, want to do the same thing for them. And if you can't find anyone like that, then here is another solution. Pick up a pen and paper and write to yourself whatever it is that you want to say. Notice if you are automatically censoring your own thoughts. Notice if you are parroting the narrative that you have been instructed to hold. And then write some more and see if you can loosen that up a bit. Let yourself do some private brainstorming. Let your mind wander to other ideas. The beautiful thing is that pen and paper are the one thing left that can't be hacked and can't be spied upon. It's entirely private and entirely under your control. No one has to see this but you. No one can censor what you write on paper in the privacy of your own space. This might be one of the only ways left that we can truly reclaim our own minds again and loosen up our thinking without fear of reprisal. Give yourself the space to write for hours if necessary, or make it a shorter daily practice with the goal of restoring your ability to think for yourself. Let your own individual mind reveal itself to you again. And if you find it difficult to write to yourself, another thing you can do is just try writing to your angels. But whatever the case, it's important that you extract your mind from the highly controlled herd so you know what is yours and what isn't. Because the mind control and propaganda are so extensive right now, humanity as a whole is moving towards an inability to evolve. The controllers are giving us less and less space to think for ourselves at all. That's the purpose of the increasing censorship. And once they consume all of our formerly free mental territory, then it's game over. They will have won and we will have lost. From there, it's only a matter of placing a chip in our brains and letting AI control whatever thoughts they want us to have. And that, my friends, is their goal. So I encourage you to take your evolution very seriously in this universe. We have to reclaim our minds or else we will be totally lost. And there's no time to waste in that effort. Don't let the controllers distract you with fear and terror. Remember who you are and stay focused on the journey that you personally want to have in this universe. Consider your mind to be sacred and special. It's part of your creative force. It belongs to you and you alone. It's not worth sacrificing your mental freedom for the sake of fitting in with the crowd, because the end result of doing so will definitely not be worth it. So stay focused on your journey. Remember that you are a creator, and always remember every day to stay focused on moving your life to that higher timeline, which will take you to a much more beautiful reality. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it out with anyone else who you think would find this meaningful. And be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I am here every Tuesday with all new videos. And with that, I'm sending you loads of love, light, and high vibrational energy. Have a beautiful day, my friends. Namaste.